right, Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Liberty and Friends here on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. My name is Sikhle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. Goodness me, it's been a while since the show has actually been on time and actually flighted on a Sunday as opposed to all sorts of random times. You'll notice, of course, if you are a regular fan of the show, that we don't have that infernal cricket noise anymore. Yeah, that's right. Spent the whole early evening hunting for that damn cricket. Had me looking like Elmer Fudd out here, you know. Shh, be very, very quiet. But yes, improved sound quality, folks. Hope you are appreciating that. Speaking about appreciating what you see here on the Big Daddy Liberty Show, hit that like button. That is your best way of showing that you appreciate and you show some love towards the channel, whether you're watching this episode of Liberty and Friends on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Hit that like button and make sure my engagement, please, stays over 50%. With that being said, remember, we have a website. Now, you can find us at www.bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can also pledge some support to the show. You know, scroll to the bottom of the screen and you can find a payment option that suits you. We're building a subscriber base of people who contribute 100 Rand a month to the show. It helps us keep going and, of course, helps me hire some of the folks who help me on other publications like Vuganazo, which I'm hoping you're enjoying. It comes to you Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. here on the BDL show. That's Vuganazo, your morning news analysis show brought to you by Moi. Speaking about Moi, Liberty and Friends is about me and the folks who join us every evening as I bring to you some of South Africa's premier conservative, libertarian, classically liberal, and even anarchist voices, the sort of people who give you comment and analysis that you won't see on the corporate media. So the Friends panel for tonight will look as follows as I bring on the 1/3 of the trio over at the Manpatria show. I'm talking, of course, about Dumo Denga. Dumo, Baba, good evening.
How are you doing, Sikhle? I am doing well today, and it's good to be back. Good to be back, and yeah, I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Absolutely. Baba, welcome to it. As we also introduce a familiar face here on the show. He hosts his own podcast. You'll find him by searching Conscious Caracal. That's right, the man who is sniping with his conservative viewpoints and commentary, some of the best in the country. I'm talking, of course, about Ernst van Zyl. Ernst, good evening.
Sawubona, Sikhle. I hope it's going well there on your side. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the chat.
Absolutely, dude. Very good to have you on the show as always. And even as I'm saying that, a reminder that Ernst always wears another hat of being part of the Afriforum team. That's right, those chaps out in Pretoria who are doing some excellent work and growing their numbers too, looking very impressive. I've seen some tweets by Ukali Creel. Shout out to Ukali Creel, man. With that being said, last but not least, a new face here on Liberty and Friends. Someone who, of course, is with the Institute of Race Relations. I'll have him tell us what he does there. I'm talking, of course, about Mlondi Mdluli. Nzimande, good evening.
Hi, Sikhle. Thank you very much for for just having me on the show, man. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to it, man.
Absolutely, man. Good to have you on. Maybe just in a brief intro, tell us what you do at the IRR. We've for a lot of people who watch the show, this is the first time they've seen you here.
Yes. So basically, I am a campaigns manager at the IRR. I joined in June, and it's been a good road since, man. I'm happy to be there.
Absolutely. And you are a strengthening contributor to the team over at the IRR. Welcome to the panel tonight. And indeed, perhaps let's get straight into our conversation tonight, because albeit there won't be many topics tonight, the topics we will be looking at are quite meaty. and their nature. Also meaty insofar as how they've captured the national imagination and indeed the debate in the country. I'm going to begin with a certain Dis-Chem, of course, as I try and fix my program here. There we go. A certain Dis-Chem, of course, which we've covered it a little bit on the show, but I wanted us to actually come back to this topic because after the furor of that initial effective no whites allowed type messaging from Dis-Chem, that's a little fusing of ESCOM and Dis-Chem there, but an equally failed policy, if you will, insofar as Dis-Chem initially putting out that rather poorly worded and indeed racist memo, Adams basically saying no whites allowed, insofar as the CEO, one Ivan Saltzman, saying not only is there no whites being brought in insofar as being employed, there's also no prospects for white people being promoted in the company, in the name, of course, of race-based national employment legislation in this country, namely employment equity.
Well, Siegler, I firstly just want to start off. I remember when the story just broke, when Dirk Herman of Solidariteit posted that letter. So many people came out of the woodwork and said, no, this is obviously fake. You can see it's fake. This is unbelievable. Like it can't be real. And then it was proven real because Dis-Chem then just a few hours later said they stand by the letter. So then it was proven real, and then a lot of tweets got deleted very quickly. But I don't blame them for thinking that the letter was fake, seeing as the sheer absurdity of race laws in South Africa truly is unbelievable. So it's I don't blame them for thinking that it was fake. But yeah, the deleting of the tweets is a bit sad. When it comes to what we saw here now with Dis-Chem, I mean, they're definitely not the only corporate in South Africa that has racially discriminatory hiring practices. We know this is happening all across the board. But the thing with Dis-Chem is they actually had the arrogance to put it down in wording, to write it down. And then when they were caught out, their apology pretty much rang that they were sorry that they got caught. I would think that in 2022 in South Africa, that everyone would take the stance that racially discriminatory hiring practices is wrong in principle, but it seems that some people just can't let that opportunity go to get some racial discrimination in there. That seems to be what I'm seeing. So, but a question that needs to be asked around this is, because I'm using the term racial discrimination a lot, but the people that support it don't. They can't seem to bring themselves to use the word for what they are supporting. They use all these flowery, rosy terms like redress and corrective action and all of these nice words. But what they're supporting is racial discrimination. As soon as they can start calling what they support what it is, then we can start having a debate like adults. But at the moment, they're just dancing around the issue. They're using all these nice words. And if you accuse them of supporting racial discrimination, which they by definition do, then they stand back and say, no, that's not what I'm doing. So that's something that just stands out to me, is that they like to use euphemisms, but they can't utter the word or the term racial discrimination, because then they would realize that they're not the good guys.
Absolutely. And again, I want to refresh the memories of you, dear viewer, for those of you who are wondering, what letter are we referring to? Dis-Chem? What? That's where I get my medicines or my cosmetics or whatever the case may be. It's this letter that I'm referring to, which I can barely read here, but I've kind of memorized verbatim, where that first bullet point, 1.1, is exactly what we're talking about, where it speaks about, of course, all the appointments of white individuals, and of course the promotions of white individuals effectively being on hold, being frozen, if you will, of a hiring freeze. And not only that, but also how does one put it? Well, let's put it as the letter puts it. These race quotas now becoming a function of what the management of Dis-Chem has to worry about on a day-to-day basis, insofar as their KPAs, right? Their key performance areas. They now must implement these racial quotas that are required by politicians as part of their KPAs. That letter. I just had to remind you there. But as to Adam's last point, I think it's critically important, because That's what we often deal with when we look at the corporate media, the chattering classes in this country, and of course, politicians and the political elites. It's this idea that they take words that you and I readily use, know what the meaning of. They slowly expand the definition of those words in order to pervert them. In psychology, we call this concept creep, and it's very easy to spot for those of us who are able to spot it. Dumo. Insofar as these woke individuals love perverting the meaning of words and using them as weasel words. For example, transformation, or this is redress, as Ernst spoke about. But these weasel words, which, if you're not attuned to them, they can hide racism behind them.
Agreed, and I think that's the strategy. A lot of the people that want this whole let's say employment equity, or that's another weasel term, employment equity, which is just another word for racial. Exactly. So even employment equity is a word that is used, and that's the whole point. The whole idea is that if someone speaks out against it, it makes the person speaking out against it look bad. So, for example, if one says, "I'm against employment equity," then it's like, "Oh, how dare you be against employment equity?" But then obviously on the surface, employment equity sounds very harmful. But when you actually look at the properties of that term, what it actually means, it's what Aaron said earlier, it is racial discrimination. But they move away from it because, again, they know they're going to be caught out in a very bad situation. But it's also, not only is that the case, there are people who actually go as far as saying that, no, we need to have discrimination or racial discrimination, and they use those terms and they say that it's necessary because of what happened during apartheid. There are people who are like that, and it's very few of them. And I mean, I don't know if you saw in the news, there's one person that said we had to shove this employment equity down the throats of Dis-Chem and all these other corporates as well, because it's necessary. So that's a really dangerous situation to be in as well, is that there are those folks. Yep.
Let me pause you there for a second. I'll let you finish your thoughts, because you raised that particular clip where you're actually referencing a lady named to Manpatria. You'll forgive me, it's a closer surname, but Manpatria of the Black Management Forum. Of course. Part of South Africa's race grifting political elites in this country. These are, pardon me, her exact words in that regard, and I'll let you comment on them, Dumo.
We welcome the initial letter that was sent by the Dis-Chem CEO to its leadership. However, we did feel that it was almost like the CEO had a gun to his head, and his only worry was really the 10% revenue penalty that he would face if they failed to transform, because they are a JSE listed company. So initially, we were not particularly excited about the tone of the letter, but we, as an organization, we believe that if BEE needs to be forced down people's throats, then that's just simply what must happen, and that's what we felt was happening.
Yes, give the race-based, or rather, give the racializing, racist, political grifter an inkling of an opportunity, and they will use state force in order to enact their ideas, knowing, obviously, Dumo, that their ideas are bad and that in real terms, no one wants them. Because they know that no one wants them, they use state force.
Exactly. And that's one of the libertarians or even anarcho-capitalists will even argue that, is that they'll just say that the state, because it has an ultimate or it has a monopoly on ultimate decision making, what happens is that people tend to try and get state power in order to do what they want. And that's a very, very sad situation, as you saw from Mangotja, if I'm not mistaken, that's how I pronounce it. She is one of those people, and that's the problem as well, because now you've got these state forces that want to implement a certain ideal, and then there are people that are jumping in and pushing it, and as a result of that, what you actually start to see is the perversion of justice in favor of the state, because the state can change the laws whenever they want. So this is a very sad situation, that there are people out there who think that there's an ideal that should be achieved and they can use force to do so. And if they can't use their own force, they can use the state as well, which is a massive problem, because that actually shows, well, all it just takes is one crazy individual or one person who can get enough people to vote for him, one crazy person to get enough people to vote for him, so that that person can take power and then implement something like BEE or even worse. So we just need to be careful about state power, because it's so attractive to the most idealistic of people. And sometimes some people even say they're narcissistic and they may have some mental issues. But again, we got to be careful. State power is dangerous at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And as Mlondi, I'm going to come to you, because there's a few things I want us to tease out here, insofar as the arguments that have been made by, I'll call it my ideological opponents, versus those of us who are on the freedom or liberty, and indeed on the non-racial side of the spectrum. And here's the most interesting one. Remember, I mentioned earlier on that trendy lefties and the race-obsessed political elites and the racist politicians in this country love using certain words because they've perverted the meaning of them. One of these words, Mongi, is equity, where South Africa strives to be a society that is defined by equality, but no, they'll say, no, equality, not so much. We prefer equity, because equity, as they'll put it, addresses the issues of the past, right? But here's where this gets interesting, and I want you to chime in on this one. Where I prefer equality, where, in other words, I mean equality of opportunity, that Ernst should have the exact same opportunities as I have. Dumo should have the exact same opportunities as Kingpin, another one of my usual regulars here. In other words, that opportunity should be equal to all. The shifty racialist, the shifty race-obsessed individuals say, no, they'll say, what we want is the outcomes to look a certain way, because that, in their view, is quote-unquote equity. So they, therefore, don't mind race quotas, as we saw with Dis-Chem trying to enact on behalf of politicians. Why is that a problem, Mlondi? What are your 2 cents on this one?
Look, Sihle, I think it's a problem because those kind of policies, they are, they tend to stem from racism. So then you find that people now now are trying to use the same policies that we used by the apartheid governments, and trying to use them now on this government to say that we want what the government did back then before was this in 1994 to try and get to the same outcomes as they got then. So I think that that's wrong, and instead, like we should be trying to ensure that that people across all races they get the same opportunities to education, as well as things such as healthcare as well, because because if we try to use policies such as BE, then that means that we are no different to the governments that was in charge of South Africa,
right.
back then. So yes.
That's right. Again, it's that notion, Ernst, of social engineering. I mean, I've made this point before on the show, that you always know a politician is shifty and indeed dodgy in their intentions if they have a certain perceived outcome already in mind, versus what we would want in a functioning society, which is a creation and opening of opportunity for all. And one of the things which interests me about this debate is how people simply don't get it. So they'll look at a policy like employment equity, they'll look at a policy like Black economic empowerment and say, yeah, of course we need to have a policy that rewards one. In other words, picks opportunity based on race. And then when you put it to them, Ernst, that, well, you're making the same mistake that your apartheid predecessors did, as Mlondi pointed out, and even our colonial predecessors did, they simply don't see it. Ernst?
I know I was muted there. So there's absolutely two dimensions here, and as Mlondi correctly pointed out, he pointed to the moral dimension of, if you look at the South Africa's past and you look at what's happening in today in South Africa, people that oppose racially discriminatory hiring practices are standing on very solid principled ground. Seeing as when you look at the past, we that support support equality of opportunity, we that do not support racially discriminatory hiring practices, it's the easiest thing in the world to then take the stance that it was wrong in the past and it's wrong in the present. But the people that are supporting it in the present are walking on very shaky ground when they then have to talk about the past and say, well, then at the same time, apartheid is evil on a moral basis because of the racially discriminatory policies employed by the government. But when it's done by a different government, then there's a different morality at play. So it's a very shaky moral ground that they're standing on. But it's not just the morality that's the issue here, Sikhle. The other issue here is there's a practical dimension here as well. South Africa has a major unemployment problem. I don't think there's anyone out there that denies that fact. It's one of the major crises in this country currently. But how do you solve that problem? I mean, it's one of the big questions. But let's look at it. Let's look at it metaphorically. Let's say the unemployment crisis in South Africa is a tree that's not producing as many fruits as it should. What do? Do you go check if maybe it needs more compost, maybe it needs more sun, maybe it needs more water, or do you hang a bunch of plastic fruit in the tree and say you solve the problem by just having the representation of fruit there instead of solving the problem of getting to the root of it, to stay with the metaphor? Just to get to the root of the problem and to make sure that you don't have to hang plastic fruit in the tree, and to make sure that tree, that employment tree, produces as many employed South Africans as is our potential, you have to go look at some critical things. One of the things is we have to solve the education crisis in this country. We're still living in a country where in 2022, children this week will go to school where they have to walk through a river to get to their class, or where they have to go to use a pit toilet when they go to school. That's the reality in 2022 still in South Africa. Now you think that child, when they graduate, if they are lucky enough to get there, if there's not some other insurmountable object in their way or obstacle in their way, then they leave school, and then they don't have the right background that they need to get a job. But then that's a real problem. So the government doesn't solve real problems; it solves imaginary ones. It creates the mirage of solutions. So it creates the impression that it's solving problems, like when it renames streets or renames towns. They create this illusion of solving problems. But when it comes to real problems, like the education crisis in this country, the unemployment crisis in this country, I would dare say the corruption crisis in this country, then they're nowhere to be seen. Then the government doesn't have any answers. Then they don't have any, because that would mean they actually have to get their hands dirty and actually get to work.
Well, there's something you raised, which I think needs to be teased out a little bit more, which is one of the arguments that is often made by our detractors, right? They'll say, oh, no, they'll say, you know, what we need to do is have workplaces in this country represent the demographics of the country. So they'll say, because South Africa is 80% Black, 8.8% colored, 7.8% white, and of course 2.6% Indian/Asian, then a fair or an equitable, that weasel word, an equitable society would be one where there's, quote, demographic representativity. Dumo, here's where it gets interesting. When I then place that same argument back to them, and I said that, oh, okay, great. If your goal is demographic representativity, then any person who says this business is proudly 100% Black owned is absolutely wrong. That individual should be saying this business should be proudly 80% Black owned, of course, 7% white owned and yada, yada, yada. And the line goes on, goes on the line. Oh, no, they'll say, of course, no. That's not what we meant. You can't have your cake and eat it, Dumo.
Agreed. Yeah, you can't. And I think that argument is a very problematic one, because you look around the world, all these natural demographic structures, they change over time. And also on top of that, you'll find that social interactions usually do not match these natural demographic structures. So, for example, look at the United States. Black people make up 12% of the population. But if you look at the NBA, they make up over half of the players in the NBA, and they are the highest paid as well. And then if you look at Asian Americans, they earn more than white Americans, even though white Americans are the majority, right? So, and again, there was no past discriminatory policies that actually favored Asian Americans. Now, if you look at South Africa, yes, now there were policies that did put black people on the back foot. But the problem is that even if you could prove how much damage was caused, whatever intervention you make to try and rectify that, you're going to have to treat other people unfairly. But then wait a minute, if those people are treated unfairly, then that means that you're going to have to, at some point, put in some policies that favor them when you've rectified the error. It just becomes a cycle of revenge over and over again. So it doesn't make logical sense in the end. I think it has to be done on a moral basis. Is it fair to discriminate or to put in a law that tells companies to discriminate based on race? And you would say no, all right? If such laws exist, they need to go. Fine, they've caused damage, but then when you try to play God and try to fix and quote unquote fix things, you're going to make things worse, and you're just going to create another cycle of revenge. So that argument that it needs to represent the natural demographic structure of the country is a silly one, because at the end of the day, you'll find that even in South Africa, a lot of the social interactions do not match the natural demographic structure. And I always say, what if some, person, let's say the white population booms, then what? What are we going to do then? Do we have to put WEE? I don't know. But you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense. Exactly.
I just wanted to quickly add there.
But before you do, Adam, just give me a second. I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping. We're at that 30-minute mark of the show, of course. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. The conversation is well underway. Welcome to it. Get my likes up, people. There's quite a few of us watching across the platforms, but my likes are nowhere near where they should be. Do me a solid favor, hit that like button right now. Who is in the house? We've got Dumo Denga of the Manpatria show, as I need to sneeze so badly, and I'm fighting it. Excuse me. We've got Dumo Denga in the house from the Manpatria podcast. Ernst van Zyl, of course, Conscious Caracal, and Mlondi Mdluli from the Institute of Race Relations. Good evening. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Adams, your thought?
Yeah, Psychle, I just wanted to quickly add there. I don't want to take up too much time. I just wanted to say what Dumo was talking about there is perfectly on the mark. I call it the pothole cycle. So what you're doing is you're just digging a new pothole to fill an old one, and that cycle just goes on forever, and you're not solving the problem. And that pretty much is the point that I made earlier as well, is that South Africa has real problems, serious problems, and this whole racial bean counting is not a viable solution. It's a solution to a problem that the government favors, because like I said earlier, then they can pretend like they're solving problems. But in the end, like I said, they're just digging a new pothole to fill an old one.
Absolutely. And I think here's the bottom line, because I want us to wrap up and perhaps make the case for non-racialism as a departure then from what South Africa has always been, whether it's been our colonial days, apartheid, or today. South African politicians and the political elites have always used race as a means of deciding winners and losers in South African society. And it's about time we break away from that obsession with race and embrace actual non-racialism, both insofar as employment legislation in this country, a non-racial approach, and of course, in empowerment or opportunity legislation, a non-racial approach. That means, in real terms, getting rid of employment equity, weasel word as it may be, and of course, getting rid of Black economic empowerment, the law in this country, and rewarding people on the one hand based on merit, and for those who are unable to compete, unable to keep up, if you will, as Ernst rightly says, society has to do the hard work, which is providing a quality education that brings people, that lifts the tide, if you will, so that all boats rise at the same time, by providing a quality education, a good healthcare system in this country, and of course, safety and security. The very things in economics we call enabling opportunities. That's the hard stuff that government, having made it its responsibility, simply doesn't want to do it. And then in order to paper over that failure, as Adam says, they'll use race-based legislation. Here's the bottom line. Race-based legislation benefits nobody except the elites in this country, whether it's Black elites or white elites, it benefits the elites. That poor chap who lives in a shack on a sand dune in Cape Town will never be a beneficiary of BEE or any legislation like that. It is always the individuals who have the closest proximity to politicians and political power who will be the loudest advocates of race-based legislation because it empowers them perpetually. No surprises then that you have the likes of we Black Management Forum piping up those gross race grifters that they are in defense of race-based legislation in this country. That's my 2 cents on that. Guys, I want to go around the room very quickly before we move on this topic. Mlondi, your final thought on this, where to from here? Shouldn't a company like Dis-Chem actually say, maybe we're not going to implement this, we're going to lobby other corporates to stand up against this racist policy?
Yes, CJ. So last week I actually drafted a letter to Dis-Chem, and I'm still yes. So basically the whole point of the letter was to ask for a meeting with the CEO and the board to say, guys, look, let's just work together and see how we can tackle this issue, because surely, yes, you guys are to blame, but also the government is to blame. So let's try to find a way that we can work together to also get all the companies to also say, guys, look, let's just do away with these laws, that are racist, and let's fight the governments instead. Yeah. So I did see the letter, but they haven't confirmed that. I think that's a good way forward. But yes,
absolutely.
But I'm going to yes.
And look, we'll keep an eye on that, because I think the outcomes of that will be very important. Adams, I've always said this, corporates in this country are absolute cowards. And sometimes what it needs is for organizations like the Institute of Race Relations to be able to step up and say, look, we'll help you fight the answer. We'll help you, we'll help you fight the state on this. We'll help you grow a damn backbone. We saw this, Adams, for example, during the spicy cough period and the lockdown, where corporates were even allowing politicians to do things that hurt the bottom line, that hurt the profit imperative of companies. It didn't make sense.
Well, Sikhle, yes, what you're talking about there is a broad issue in South Africa that stretches far beyond just the issue of racially discriminatory hiring practices or, for example, lockdowns. In the past 2 years, we saw, the saying goes, when you're really in someone's pocket, when they say jump, you asked how high, instead of pushing back against it. But that's not the case in South Africa with corporate South Africa. Corporate South Africa just says, how high can I look? How high I can jump, daddy government. They don't even wait for the government to tell them to jump. They just start jumping and show the government how obedient they are. And we saw this during COVID with the lockdowns, and I remember still when the public didn't have to wear masks. I remember walking into a shop, and then the employees there were wearing masks, and I told them, like, you don't have to. You really don't have to wear masks. They say, no, it's corporate policy. So the corporates were still forcing their employees to wear masks long after the government had told the public that they didn't have to wear masks anymore. But yeah, that's besides the point. Just to finish off, when it comes to solving problems in South Africa, the big problems that I mentioned earlier, the only way forward is to not make the same mistakes of the past, not to get into, like I said earlier, that pothole cycle where you're just stuck in a vicious cycle of trying to get revenge for what happened in the past, and then you create a new class of disadvantaged people. They want to get revenge, they get revenge, and then it just goes on and on. We have to break that cycle. And you said something very interesting there, which it might sound strange to a lot of ears in South Africa, specifically liberal ears, but the idea that maybe it's time after more than 100 years that we drop the racially discriminatory policies as the main modus operandi of the government trying to solve problems. It sounds strange because a lot of people just think, oh, we live in the post-1994 South Africa. Racially discriminatory policies aren't a thing anymore. But that's why I talked earlier about that's because we use all these euphemisms. We still have racially discriminatory laws. We still have exclusionary hiring practices based on race. We just don't call it. We're not so blatant anymore about it. We're just calling it different nice words now. So that's the thing that we need to get past. Sorry, I'm going on a bit long. Just one more sentence. So the thing we need to get past is the euphemisms. That's the first step in defeating this scourge of racial discrimination, is to start calling it what it is and to call the supporters of it what they are, supporters of racial discrimination. And don't let them use any other word. Let them own it. And as soon as they own it, then we can have a discussion and a debate like adults.
Absolutely. And, maybe to that particular point that Ernst makes around how do we have this conversation as adults? I think a very good question here by Joking Atheist says, look, fine, he gets it, right? But how do we tackle the argument, pardon me, that the private sector has blacks, or rather black people are underrepresented still in the private sector? How do we fix that, Dumo? Because obviously that's how, it's the refuge, if you will, of the racializing political elites, they'll say, well, of course you guys will say non-racialism, but blacks are still, quote, underrepresented in the corporate world. How do we actually fix that?
I don't think it's something that needs to be fixed, to be honest. Exactly. I think the idea that a certain race is underrepresented it's a fallacy. You're basing it on a percentage that can change in a matter of years or in a decade, right? So it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. So I think this idea that this thing of underrepresented and overrepresented, again, that's another euphemism. It's there to give off the impression that there is either there's an excessive amount of whites or not enough blacks or whatever. But that's not true. I mean, how can you look at a country and say, okay, because the population is like this, then everything needs to represent that? I mean, let's look at males and females, for example. I mean, I was looking at the Stats SA employment stats, right, on women on people in social work. You'll find that even though women make up 50% of the population, or close to 50%, in social work they make up like close to 80% of the workers. And then if you look in the manufacturing space, you find something. You find that men are overrepresented in the manufacturing space. And again, now, are you saying that now we need to fix, well, not fix, but interact or intervene so that it represents the natural demographic? That doesn't make sense. It's clearly there's another role. There's something else at play here, and people don't want to take that into account.
No, I'd agree. And indeed, Joking Atheist just comes back with just further. Let me call it a question. It's not really framed as a question now. Of course, by merit and not by color, he says it. But if you were black, would you see that you are not sufficiently represented in the private sector? Let me quickly shut this down. Okay, Dumo, go ahead, Dumo.
Whenever I get asked this question, I always say, look, I can have a black manager, right? and say I'm represented. But he doesn't pay me more money. How's that going to increase my salary? Like, bruh, the CEO of a company that I can work for can be black, right? And it's not going to make me earn more money. There we go. The president is black, but I'm paying more in taxes. So what's the point? I'm represented, but it's more expensive. What the hell?
But it's also this notion, And joking atheist, I'm not referring to you here, but broadly speaking, it's a very soft bigotry of low expectation. This idea that Black South Africans somehow are walking around hoping to be, quote, represented, or that something only becomes meaningful if I see someone who has the same skin color as me in a particular given position. It's absolute bullcrap. And we have to divorce ourselves from this notion that Black South Africans are walking around hoping to see someone of their same color. Otherwise, they're either too scared to be in that space, or it's prohibitive for them, whatever the case may be. It's bullshit. Excuse my language, but it is nonsense. That being said, guys, I want to move us on. I really have to move us on because we have to look at time here. Guys, maybe keep the conversation going. I do read your comment section even after the show. Let me know what you thought about this particular issue. As we argue, of course, maybe poorly because we didn't get to it quite, that South Africa has to move towards a non-racial perspective where race is not what we use to determine opportunity or even employment in this country, that merit is much more useful. And of course, if there is going to be a proxy for opportunity, then poverty should be the metric we used. A government should be able to, a politician should stand in a pulpit and say, I will help you, not because you're Black, not because you're colored, white or Indian, I will help you because you're poor. That should be the metric in which we decide if there is going to be empowerment legislation, how we enact it. With that being said, let me move us on. Guys, interesting week we've had this one insofar as we had a very interesting case. We had an interesting case here of a story that broke of an individual, a kingpin, we were told, who was arrested in rather dramatic fashion out in Vrede in the Free State province. This chap, having stolen in excess of what was 100 million rand plus of fuel from Transnet pipelines, those pipelines that run from Durban to the Vaal primarily, became fabulously rich, of course, doing this, and busted in dramatic style. But I don't want to dwell on that particular incident. What I want to have a conversation here, Dumo, I'll begin with you, is seemingly it's damn easy to steal from these state-owned enterprises. Their systems and indeed their incentives are so bad that basic corporate governance is seemingly not there, and criminals and the criminally intent have spotted that and are literally siphoning billions from these SOEs. Eskom is another one.
Agreed. And the reason why is because of the fact that the state, they have a monopoly on taxation. They're the only organization within a country that can actually take someone's property or expropriate a portion of someone's property, and that person can't fight back. And if they try to fight back, they'll go to jail. And the reason, and if that's the case, if you can expropriate property from people and you're the only one that's allowed to do it, whatever business you create, you're not going to have any incentive to keep the infrastructure alive or keep it in good condition, because you can always use tax money to fund it. That's the case. And I think that's why we see that the state-owned companies are big targets for these criminal organizations. Because at the end of the day, what's going to happen with Transnet? They're just going to go to the states and say, hey, man, we need some money. And then the state is like, yeah, we'll give you some money. Here we go. And then we go through that whole cycle over and over again. So the criminals see it. The criminals see it and they steal. But, try that on a private company. They'll be lucky to get it right the first time, but they won't do it again because they know they're going to wise up and put extra security and stuff like that, especially if it's a big corporate. But when it's the government, it's a different story. And not only that, even if when they do steal from the the public companies or the government-owned companies, what will make it worse is that they'll get caught and then they'll be like, hey, man, then they'll pay the guy off. And then they'll see that, hey, there's actually benefits in this corruption, and then they turn a blind eye to it. So that's what makes it even worse, because tax is still going to cover it at the end of the day. So that's my point. Yeah.
No, you're spot on, though. And as Mlondi, I want you to unpack, I think, which is the other weird element of this. On Ivuganazo, quite a few weeks ago, we shared a story of how Eskom, right? So we're sitting in currently stage, is it 4? I don't know. Stage 4 of load shedding at the moment. But one of the major reasons for load shedding at the moment is the coal that is being hijacked by these very sophisticated syndicates now, who basically collude with, I don't know if I'm on air here. I just had a bit of
I can hear you,
okay. These syndicates, Mlondi, who collude with these government officials to steal coal. I mean, they're stealing 65 truckloads of coal at a time, where the truck disappears. From the distance of the mine to a coal burning power plant, a truck just disappears, like a Bermuda Triangle in that period. And what it rocks up with is a lower quality of coal mixed with rubble, and it's destroying these power plants. Mlondi, the corruption and the crime with the SOEs.
Yes, Sihle, well, since the past decade or so, there's been culture of corruption, like in these SOEs, for example, as just mentioned at Dischem, and as well as a Transnet. So like you see that, so like you see that that this constant increase, like like in the culture of corruption, and it's only getting worse. So it's just it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I guess that stems that stems from the corrupt governments. So like the government just keeps on getting more corrupt, and people are saying, well, look, like like if they're corrupt, then why should like why shouldn't I be corrupt as well? So I guess that the government is to blame for this. They are themselves to blame. Yes.
Well, it gets very interesting for me. Ernst, I want to come to you here. It gets very interesting for me because law enforcement in this country is playing a bit of a catch-up game, insofar as there's two elements here: systems versus law enforcement. Let me unpack this because I want you to chew on it. When it comes to systems, there's this never-ending merry-go-round of CEOs and boards, and it's Zweli Mkhize, for example, one of the presidential hopefuls in the ANC, recently came out and said, well, I believe, that's Zweli Mkhize, that Andre de Ruyter, the current CEO of Eskom, is absolutely useless. And what we need now is another CEO, one who will recognize that this SOEs are in a bad state and yada, yada, yada. Again, reinforcing this notion that the ANC loves pushing, that it's just a matter of putting in the right guy, quote unquote, and that'll somehow fix the problems on the one hand. Meanwhile, that right guy, no matter who it is, has to break up these hardened criminal syndicates that operate from within these organizations. And simply put, if you're at the helm of an SOE like Transnet or Eskom, here's the truth: you don't actually know who to trust.
Well, Sihle, that's it's true. It's a sad state of affairs. But what you've just described there is the criminal ecosystem that has been allowed to flourish in South Africa under the ANC. I saw it the other day. There was a opinion piece in the Daily Maverick, not the Daily Maverick, in the Citizen, that said the ANC is the biggest criminal syndicate in Africa, and I mean that doesn't sound too wrong to me. When it comes to what the major problem is, Sihle, as you hit the nail on the head there, the major problem comes in that we have these entrenched criminal networks now in South Africa, a massive underground black market for illegal goods, weapons, drugs. All of this has become entrenched in South Africa, and then also all these, as you've mentioned as well, all these extortion rackets, all these different networks that are used to blackmail and to kidnap, and it's a massive mess that we find ourselves in. But it's not something that just happened organically. It's not something that just popped up one day because South Africa had a bad roll of the dice. It's the work of the ANC. It's an ecosystem that's been allowed to flourish under a political party that proclaims to the entire country, we do not take crime seriously. That's the message that the ANC sends to South Africans. Not just the crime affecting regular South Africans, like violent crime, murders, theft, hijackings. Not just the fact that the ANC cannot deal with that crime and very clearly is out of their depth when it comes to bringing down and eliminating that type of crime. Also, when it comes to the crime of corruption, stealing funds, that when that type of crime comes onto the fore, the ANC also doesn't have an answer. To tackle that crime would mean to tackle itself. That's why the ANC cannot stop corruption. And through their actions, through their inability to deal with corruption, and combined with the fact that they can't control or they can't do anything about the crime situation in South Africa, sends a message to the entire country that we as a party, the ANC, firstly, clearly do not have the capacity to deal with crime. And secondly, which is more disturbing, we do not have the will to deal with crime. Because if the ANC had the will to deal with crime, they would start in their own backyard. We would have had at least one example of an ANC politician sitting in prison right now for corruption, but we don't see that.
And Dumo, it gets very interesting for me because you look around the world and you see familiar patterns beginning to emerge in South Africa. Let me be precise and specific. Insofar as you have the drug cartels in South America, the Colombias and your like, where they become very sophisticated networks in order to move goods, drugs invariably, and also launder money from the illicit goods. You have that exact same level of sophistication here in South Africa with these cartels, these SOE cartels, guys who exploit SOEs, entrepreneurs, basically, where you have had the mob in New York, for example, in America, which, for instance, has a stake in construction, has a stake in XYZ, and basically extorts. If you want to be a legitimate business owner in construction there, you must pay. I think the going rate is 10%, 2%, pardon me, of your contract to these mafiosos. We have the same thing here in Durban, for example, with the quote-unquote forums. These forums who basically say nothing will happen in the city unless we have a stake in it. No construction, no tender work, nothing. And they will hide, of course, behind the guise, that euphemism we were speaking about earlier on of race. They'll say, oh no, they'll say, because we're black and this is about black empowerment and BEE, that's the reason why we'll use force and violence, in some cases rocking up to construction sites armed to the teeth to demand their cut of this, emboldened by who Ernst was rightly saying, by the ANC. This culture of entitlement, Dumo, comes from the ANC and really the left of spectrum politics in this country.
Agreed. And this is why, private property is important, because I think one of the major issues is that with this entitlement mentality comes with a disrespect for private property. And I think the ANC has made private property rights even worse over time, as you can see with that expropriation bill, and even attempting to even change the constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation. So the whole idea now is that now you have to disrespect private property rights. And I do believe that if private property rights were well respected and there was some way that people could actually protect them, these construction mafias wouldn't even think about doing what they're doing. Because at the end of the day, if they know that, listen, we're going to rock up to the construction site armed to the teeth, hey, that company that's building, they've also got their own security as well, and we might get shot and killed by them. So it's not worth it. So the only reason why they're doing that is because they know that they will not get resistance from these people that just want to build, because that's all they want to do. They just want to build. They don't want problems. They don't want to, and they want to go home. But I think that if people had the ability to actually protect their property as well as they could, or as well as they should rather, then I do think the construction mafia would not be there to cause any damage. But again, the state doesn't want that. The state doesn't want people to be able to protect their private property because they want to expropriate more of it. And then criminals are taking advantage of this and saying, well, I mean, it's not like these guys can defend themselves anyway. We can get the guns illegally, and then we can just force them. And it's a really sad situation to be in. Really, really sad.
Absolutely. And I must stress this. It's becoming a massive, no, it's not becoming, it is a massive problem. You now have a situation where there was a point where these forums or these mafias, if you will, these extortion rings, invaded the factory floor of Toyota here in Durban, demanding their stake, their cut of the production of Toyota. And I will say what everybody has maybe too afraid to say. It is definitely an entitlement mentality, one which the ANC has fostered in this country, suggesting as it has through policy and law that being black, merely being black, should entitle you to an X percentage of someone else's endeavor, someone else's enterprise. Invariably, X percent as defined by Black economic empowerment, or X percent of job opportunities as written out in employment equity. It is a mindset, a mentality that is killing us, specifically us within Black South Africa, if you will, when no one wants to create anything. It has destroyed the impetus to be enterprising, to create, to be an entrepreneur that starts something. No one wants to start something. Everybody wants a cut of that next guy who does the hard work. It is toxic, and it is a mentality that has to be called out if this country is to prosper and move in any direction other than a failed, I nearly swore, failed state. I feel like another F word was going to come after failed there. I'm sorry, now that I've got my hackles up here a little bit, let me remind everybody who's watching, just to give me a chance to calm down, that this is Liberty and Friends. We're in the last 30 minutes. It's usually a 90-minute show. We're in the last 30 minutes of the show. I am going to move us on a little bit to the next topic. In conversation with me today is with Dumo Denga from the Manpatria show. There he is over there. Make sure you catch their show every Saturday on their website. That's at Dumo, your website?
Manpatria.com.
There we go. And of course, Ernst van Zyl, Conscious Caracal. Make sure you find his show on YouTube, please. And Mlondi Mdluli, first time on the show. He's from the Institute of Race Relations. Welcome to it. Hit that like button. This is Liberty and Friends. Guys, I'm going to move us on because just simply based on time. We have a situation in this country where, if you'll remember, I want to jog your memory, guys. There's that heyday of Move 1 Million. I don't know if you remember those organizations, and an associated message with them was hashtag direct elections. This idea that South Africans were tired of party politics, and they were saying, how about we pick the people that represent us directly? Outside of the party politics, allow them to go to parliament. That movement culminated eventually with the Constitutional Court saying, yeah, people are right. Absolutely. Legislation or the Electoral Act must be amended to allow individuals to be, the ability, that is, for them to be elected directly into parliament without having to be a part of party politics or what am I trying to say? Yeah, political parties. Sorry, that's the order I was looking for. Adams, I'm going to begin with you, and Mlondi, you're next. We now have a situation where that bill, the Electoral Amendment Bill, is currently before Parliament. That is, it's passed the National Assembly, but it simply doesn't look like what people wanted, which is to make it easier for individuals to go into Parliament. Seemingly, the party politicians who wrote this law or this amendment have said, actually, let's make it kind of difficult for them as individuals to enter, but easy for us.
Well, Sinclair, it's unfortunate that you asked me first to answer, seeing as I'm planning to give a very unorthodox answer. Well, firstly,
I'm going to come to you then, Mlondi, in a moment. Yeah.
Let's just start off by saying, yeah, of course, I think it's in a perfect world, it would be better to elect an individual rather than a party, because the party can elect anyone then into positions and you don't even know who they're going to choose. But my unorthodox take on it, and I hope this becomes the norm very quickly, is that party politics won't save you. I think South Africans need to stop relying so heavily on party politics, putting all their eggs in that one basket, and they start getting to work in their own communities, start working on solutions on.
Okay. I have no idea what just happened there.
Can you hear me and can you see me?
Yeah, Mlondi, I can hear you, but for the life of me, I can't get to Ernst and Dumo back on screen. But maybe just to buy me time, Mlondi, the Electoral Amendment Bill, the Institute of Race Relations, you guys have been one of the most vocal civic society organizations. Firstly, Mlondi, I don't know if you've read up on it, but why is this bill a problem, number one? And number two, what are you guys busy doing to deal with it?
Yes. So, Sihle, the bill is basically a problem because it does not allow, it makes it harder for people to, for independent candidates to be directly elected. So so basically, we are saying that is unconstitutional, and basically we're saying that because now the bill is currently sitting with the National Council of Provinces. We are saying that that the NCOP must reject the bill. And basically we say that failing which we are then going to challenge the the bill in court. So we are pretty much very against the bill.
Absolutely, and I think rightly so, because there's two issues here at hand. Number one, this bill, right, was meant to address the imperative that was passed from the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court made it quite clear. It basically said, you, politicians, need to amend the Electoral Act to allow for individuals to be able to stand for office, that is, to stand for parliament. In doing so, they can do so without having been a part of a political party. Dumo, I'm going to come to you. What these politicians have effectively done is basically said, okay, fine, we'll comply with that order from the Constitutional Court, but we'll wait until almost to the last minute to do it. And then once we do it, what they've added to this bill is very shifty language, which there were two things. Number one, the threshold that an individual must basically comply with in order to be eligible is much higher than that of a political party. For instance, an individual will have to get as many as 150,000 votes in order to perhaps secure a seat, versus a political party which could secure a seat with 40,000 votes. That's the first problem with this particular bill. The second problem is, of course, it creates a condition where once the votes are tallied, you could actually have a situation where a party that didn't receive 50% of the votes could actually get 50% of the seats in parliament. Dumo, clearly this opens the door to a constitutional crisis if, as Mlondi says, the NCOP passes the law and it goes to the president who then signs it and it becomes law.
Exactly. This is, again, this goes back to what Hopper has stated about the state, which is that because they are the ultimate, because they have a monopoly on ultimate decision making, whatever laws that they will create will always be perverted in favor of the state. And this is what has happened. The people in parliament have now seen that their jobs are on the line. If they just simply allow individuals to come in and to occupy seats in parliament, They're probably looking at each other and saying, hey, that could be my seat. So what do? You make it harder for them to actually get in. So this is not surprising. Even though the Constitutional Court has stated that individuals should be allowed, they're going to make it harder. And that's exactly what the state does. They're always going to pervert the law in their own favor. It's always going to happen. And that is the major problem that we're starting to see now in South Africa, is that the state is becoming a massive problem. And I think people need to realize this now very quickly, that the state will never legislate anything that will give more power to individuals. Never. As long as what they're legislating can give the state more power, then definitely they'll pass it with ease. So I think that's an important lesson that South Africans need to learn. And perhaps this should trigger something to say, you know what? Do we actually need the state? Do we actually need these politicians? And I hope that's the question that people are going to ask.
That last question, critically important, because it speaks to an ethos I've been pushing on the show here of umazakele, hashtag mazakele, which is the Zulu word, of course, for build it yourself, hashtag do it yourself, in a sense, which is very much the same as what the fellas at Solidariteit, the trade union push, which is owns self, hashtag. Ernst, as someone who's with the Afriforum, you guys have a similar approach. The idea that actually stop waiting for these damn politicians. Build it yourself. Do it yourself.
I see there in the chat, Henk Klopper says we want Ernst's unorthodox opinion. Well, when StreamYard kicked me off, it just showed me the powers that be don't want people to think outside of the party politics box. That's become clear now. No, Sikhe, it's absolutely true. I mean, it doesn't mean you should throw away party politics completely and completely just ignore that side of reality and that side of human existence. But it does mean that you shouldn't put all your eggs in that basket, as I said earlier before the establishment cut me off. The important thing that needs to be done is that you need to start organizing and you need to start getting involved somewhere. Don't wait for and this is maybe at the root of this electoral bill. There's a notion that's very dangerous, this idea of waiting for a hero to save you, waiting for a hero on a white horse, waiting for the second coming of Shaka or the second coming of General De La Rey to come save your people, to save your community. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to be that hero yourself. You're going to have to get involved in your own personal capacity. That doesn't mean you have to start your own Afriforum now. It doesn't mean you have to start an organization from scratch. It just means you have to get involved in a network and structures that already exist. You can start your own organization. Doesn't mean you shouldn't attempt that. But start small. A team is technically two people. So when you start off your organization, you just need a team, and a team is two people. I mean, Afriforum started with three employees and 3 members. Those 3 members were those 3 employees. So that's where it starts. It starts all very small, but you're going to have to, it's that financial term of diversifying your investments. You're going to have to diversify your options for the future as well. Don't just put all your money and all your chips on the party politics table or on that horse. You're going to have to diversify, create some other avenues for your own community's betterment and for the elimination of problems. And at the heart of that, at the core of that, is community-based solutions, as we've discussed many times on your channel.
Aaron, before I let you go, there's actually a question for you that I've just put on the screen now that I want you to chew on.
Right.
But before I do that, let me just say a quick thank you to Dirk Duprier for the super sticker. I don't know what that currency is. Anybody who can tell me what that currency is?
We don't know if it's a lot or if it's nothing.
Or whatever it is, there's 9,900 of it. Shout out to you, Dirk, and big thank you for that. But Adam, back to that question, which I just wanted to chew on very quickly. Joking atheist step, basically saying, does self-preservation by self-reliance remove power from the state, or does it run the risk of allowing the state more power by ignoring it?
Well, firstly, let's answer the first part. Does self-preservation by self-reliance remove power from the state? Absolutely, because the state gains its power from you outsourcing your responsibilities to the state. So when you're saying, when the state's whole mantra is Don't worry about security. I'll handle security. Don't worry about litter. I'll handle litter. Don't worry about crime. I'll handle crime. Don't worry about XYZ. I'll handle it. Don't worry. You just have a good time. You just sit back and relax. That's the age-old story. That's how the state grows to the massive leviathan that it is today. And as soon as you start taking those responsibilities back, every responsibility that you as a community take back, you as a family take back, every one of those responsibilities is one piece of power that you're taking away from the state, because it's got your it's got you in a very tight position where it can tell you jump and you have to say how high, because you've outsourced over years. People have outsourced all their responsibilities to the state, and then when the state starts losing capacity, like we're seeing now in South Africa in 2022 with electricity capacity, water capacity, then you start suffering, because the fact is you've left all those things to the state, and you've let them have a monopoly on all those things instead of making sure that there are many options at your disposal. So no, I don't think it gives power to the state, and I think it definitely takes away every time you take responsibility for one more thing in your life and one more thing in your community. Absolutely.
Mlondi, as I come to you, I'm going to ask you to let the folks know how they can get involved insofar as, I know you guys have a campaign on this, I'll try and put it on the screen, but how can people get involved in hashtag rejecting the bill or reject the bill?
Yes, guys, please just go onto the IRR's websites and go under campaigns and just go have a look at the work that we're doing there, guys. Please, we really do need your support. Just go to to the IRR's page, and you'll see there it's the first thing under campaigns. If I'm not mistaken, there's campaigns there. See, I'm sure you can see it. Campaigns on the top. Yeah. So if you can click on campaigns, you'll see the campaigns that we're currently doing, especially on the on the Electoral Amendment Bill, as well as the campaign on the Dis-Chem BEE issue. And there's also a lot of other other campaigns. There's also the campaign on the EEB as well. So there's a lot, guys. So please, I do urge you to have a look at it. And please.
Absolutely. As Mlondi having said that, make sure you visit the IRR website, please. That's at www.irr.org.za/campaigns. There, of course, you can see how you can get involved to defend your freedoms and your rights. Dumo, I'm going to give you the last say here on this one and really cap it off for us, because I think there is, as I get everybody back on screen, my apologies there, I think there's something to be said here about how, and you raised it actually, shifty party politicians are. On the one hand, Dumo, they frustrate this particular piece of legislation by basically slanting it where they benefit at the expense of individuals and what ordinary South Africans wanted when they said hashtag direct elections. That's the one part. And then when they do have this power, Dumo, when they do have all of this influence, what do? They're busy. When it comes to ANC, corrupt, busy stealing, nothing's off limits now. They steal everything. Even the hubcaps of your car are coming off if the ANC had anything to say to that. Opposition politicians, as I always say, never missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity, squabbling amongst themselves at the moment. Action SA, DA, at each other's throats at the moment, thinking that somehow one is better than the other in the eyes of us, the voters. Give me the hard sell here. What should an electoral bill that actually serves the interests of what we wanted South Africans look like?
It's very simple. They should just allow individuals to become MPs without heavy restrictions. That's all it is. That's all they need to do. If they were interested in doing that, but they're not. They're really not. They really want people to think that they're the ones that are in charge of the show. And I'm just going to, just leave something as well with regards to politicians. You'll find that, politicians are there. They say they want to, help your security and, they want to do service delivery and stuff. But you'll find politicians are not in the game of doing that, right? They don't have a track record of delivering promises. In fact, very few of them do, but most of them, they're just good at being politicians. So now you're voting for people, right? Now, I'm not saying people should not vote, but this is just ultimately what's happening. You're voting for people that have no track record in service delivery. And that service delivery is something that you could have just actually bought from a private company who would have done it for you anyway for money. But you're voting for people who are promising that they're going to do that, but they have no track record in service delivery, but at the same time, they have a track record in being good politicians. Something is wrong. These politicians they're useless, guys. They are useless. That's the thing. You cannot vote. And again, I'm not saying people should not vote, but just whenever you vote, you should think about that. That usually the party that you're voting for, you're just voting for a skilled politician. You're not voting for someone who can actually get service delivery done. Hence, the lack of service delivery that we see in South Africa.
Absolutely. Guys, I must close it there. Insofar as we are out of time, as always, as I like to do at the end of the show, is give everybody an opportunity to share how we can get a hold of them on your social media, of course. Mlondi, let me begin with you. If you do want to be found on social media, that is, how do the people get in touch with you?
So, guys, I am on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at Mlondi _Mdluli. Yeah.
There you go, Mlondi Mdluli. Shout out to you, man, and thank you for having joined us on the show. Ernst, how do the folks find you on your platforms, and what can we look forward to as Conscious Caracal this week?
Right. Thank you very much, Sihle, for another great panel discussion. People can find me on my YouTube channel. That's where I upload most of my content. That's Conscious Caracal. And then you can also follow me on Twitter, also at ConCaracal. And then, this week, what's ahead? Well, Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, I'm talking to Gideon Joubert about a topic that we touched on in this chat here tonight, and that is the vast criminal networks that have become entrenched in South Africa. And Gideon's going to be telling us about exactly the nature of totalitarianism coming through those criminal networks in South Africa. So you can be looking forward to that. That's at 7 o'clock on Tuesday on my YouTube channel. I hope everyone has an excellent week ahead. And I'll check you on the next time I'm on the Big Daddy Liberty show.
Absolutely. Last but not least, I'm a fellas over at Manpatria podcast, Puti, but also on the show on Saturday. And what can we look forward to?
Yeah, so we spoke about the crime mafia in South Africa, and also BEE, and I forgot the last one, sorry. But it was a good episode 143. If you want to go check it out, it's at manpatria.com. Just check the chat. You'll see the link there, and you'll find the episode link there. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's at Dumo Denga. And yeah, that's it.
Excellent. And on that front, let me say goodbye to all of my guests. And before I say goodbye to you, firstly, thank you to you guys. Remember, Liberty and Friends is interactive. You, the viewer, are very much a part of the show. And before I do that, let me also say a big thank you to Brett Sesams or Seasons. Sorry, man, if I'm butchering your surname, but quite a few super chats came through from you, homie. Thank you very much for that support. If you are on YouTube, of course, you can hit that donate button and contribute some shekels my way. With that being said, thank you once again for watching. You can find us on our website at www.bigdaddyliberty.com. And you can, of course, catch all the episodes that you may have missed out on. And if you want to support the show, you can also do there. We have various payment methods at the bottom of the screen. With that being said, have a great evening. I will see you tomorrow bright and early at 7 a.m. as I always do every weekday for Vuganazo, our morning daily news analysis show. With that being said, once again, thanks for watching. And as I always say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.